Boom! All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got an action-filled episode for you guys today. How to amplify your brand and achieve industry leadership through media exposure, book publishing, authentic public engagement. So stay tuned. We got a good one packed for you here. We go.
Shut up and sit down.
Look, a business can give you everything you want in life: prestige, wealth, freedom. It can also take everything away from you. This show is for those who are willing to take that risk. These are the real life stories of entrepreneurs. But before we start, I have one small favor to ask. Please leave a comment. It can be advice, critiques, tips, feedback, or share this with someone, because your engagement is the most valuable and most powerful form of social currency. So thank you, and welcome to another episode of Business Bros.
All right, imagine this. You have a brilliant vision of a groundbreaking book and a desire to be recognized as an industry leader. Well, our guest today is an expert who can make that happen. He's the founder of Empathy Firm, a company dedicated to helping business owners gain visibility, influence, and authority through media placement, podcast bookings, and more. If you're ready to take your brand to the next level, then stay tuned. But first, let's remember that it's not about the vanity metrics. It's about the authentic public engagement and trackable ROI. And our guest today guarantees results, or you get your money back. So without further ado, let's welcome the mastermind behind the humanity-driven PR, Mr. Grant Lira. There you go. Grant, thank you very much for being on the program today. What do you think?
How are you doing? You well?
Good. Sorry, we had a little delay there. No worries. All right, man. Let's start off with this first thing. I have a nice little intro for you, but everybody who comes on the show, of course, is selling something, is doing something that they are promoting. So I think I might have gotten something a little wrong for you here, but what is it that you're promoting today? What is it that you do for a living?
Effectively, we're an organization called Growth Matters. We specialize in sales management development, but I think the best value for the audience is, how do you take two people from the East Rand of Johannesburg in South Africa and build a global brand? And what are some of the challenges that come with it that'll be relevant to your audience? So keen to share with you a bit more about that.
All right. Well, tell me about your target audience. Who is it that you're after? Who do you want to come after, talk to specifically? Who does Growth Matters really help?
Effectively, we work with global brands. So we work with international brands developing sales managers. But primarily the key thing here is that what we find happening is most organizations take top performing sales professionals, they move them into a sales management role, and they never develop them. And they're fundamentally different things. As you all know from other businesses, being a great hairstylist doesn't make you a great hair salon owner. Being a great chef in the kitchen doesn't make you a great restaurant owner. And sales is no different. When you move from selling into sales management, you really understand the nuances and different mindset that's required. And that's really where we focus as a business. As I said, started in Johannesburg, South Africa, but blessed to be working with a lot of global brands in the space.
Does it matter whether you're doing it globally or you're right there in Johannesburg? Does it matter some of these fundamental sales skills that you're teaching people, or can they transfer those skills to any platform or any business around the world?
Yeah, effectively any business. So where we work across technology, pharmaceuticals, engineering, it doesn't really matter. The disciplines of sales management remain the same. And that's the key thing. It's about the disciplines. What you see in sales is an overinvestment in what I call the enablement train, but not laying those tracks of execution, because we're not enabling the managers that are responsible for that execution. So translatable outside of different countries, outside of different cultures, outside of different industries, the fundamentals of, I suppose, any profession, the disciplines remain the key differentiator.
Let me ask you about what your education is. How did you get here? What does it take for a salesperson to become an excellent salesperson? And how did you become a trainer of these types of people?
Yeah, so interesting backstory, but simply put, around about 12, I unfortunately lost my father. But coming from Dutch heritage, my father was an engineer and his father was an engineer, and maybe didn't call it before that, but my great grandfather was an engineer. And I grew up watching Airwolf, Knight Rider, and MacGyver. So not my fault. I wanted to become an electronic engineer. And I thought that would be, what it was on the TV shows, but it wasn't. And I read a book called You're Born an Original, Don't Die a Copy by, I think it's John Mason. And it's a wonderful book to start reading because every chapter is 2 pages. So it's easy to get through, right? But the one chapter he said, if you passionately hate what you're doing for 2 weeks, you got to find something else. And I was like, 2 weeks? I've been doing this for 2 years. And, I thought I'd be MacGyver, but I'm cleaning cockroaches out of a banking terminal, not what I signed up for. So a friend of mine said, why don't you try sales? And I'm asking your audience not to drop off now, but I got fired from my first 4 sales gigs. But I did everything they told me to, right? They said, Al, you need to know your product. Man, I was the world's best talking brochure. Then they said, Al, you're not motivated enough. Man, I was so excited you could weld with me. And I became the most motivated world's best talking brochure. But the engineer in me doesn't believe that someone's born with we have some innate talents, but there's things we can develop. And the manager changed my life. He said these words. He said, Alan, is sales a job or a profession? So I said, no, it's a profession. He said, what was your previous profession? I said, electronic engineering. He said, how hard did you study to be an engineer? I said, I studied really hard. He goes, how hard have you studied to be a sales professional? And I kind of had that penny drop moment and realized that we don't treat sales like a profession. And there's that saying, it's not mine. I forget where it comes from. But, an Olympic athlete trains a lifetime for a moment's glory. In sales, we think we can train for a moment and then have a lifetime of glory. So off the back of that advice, I really started deep diving into understanding sales, became really successful in the technology sales environment, started training salespeople. And my frustration was I couldn't scale the skill. And what I started to realize was it's under good sales management that you see massive change. And hence Growth Mode started focusing on sales management. But it's it's got to be a profession.
That training, the lifetime value of what you're gaining there, you're exactly right. I love the analogy you put there, by the way. Like, you didn't have the effort or the drive to learn to become an actual salesperson in the past. You had to put in the work, and you can develop any one of those skills. Everybody starts at zero. Everybody is not very good at things when they first start off, but it's those people who continue that practice that they get to that level of, I don't want to say perfection, but they get to that level of progress where they become very successful at what it is they do. Because I don't think there's actually a perfect level. Some people might have some of those innate skills that help them kind of move a little faster along that progress line, but it's still progression over time. And you're right, everyone can develop those skills if they try. How did you decide to get started as an entrepreneur, though? Like, you could have used those sales skills in a business. You could have applied yourself with an existing company. Why become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, twofold. So the one thing, it came at me. So I'd love to tell you, get some amazing story of a moment of enlightenment, a kind of Jerry Maguire moment, but it wasn't that, right? It was literally, I decided to go to sales training. I bought the rights for an international company in Africa. And long story short, I won an international deal. And they said, listen, Al, you can't win the international deal. You're based in South Africa. I said, well, nowhere in my contract does it state that. And we're kind of arm wrestling for this deal. And that February, my contract with them came up for renewal. And they didn't renew, and they took their global customer. So after I licked my victim wounds, I looked at it and said, well, I wasn't happy anyway. And now I've got a choice. I can go into earning this revenue or becoming an entrepreneur. And as with anything, at that moment, you also have to make entrepreneur your profession. I love the words you've used. Professionals practice. You see, lawyers practice, doctors practice, sales professionals practice, entrepreneurs practice. It's that growth mindset. As you said, we never get to perfect, because when you get to perfect, you've got a fixed mindset and you're going to get punched in the face by the reality of the world, right? So I made entrepreneurship their practice, and I said, wait a minute. If I am so fundamentally convicted, I have that conviction of the value proposition of developing sales managers, maybe my creator's given me a kick up the backside and said, well, here's your opportunity. Either go continue lick your wounds or get up and let's go show the world. And that was the moment. What I'll share with the audience, your overnight success is going to be the longest night of your life.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's the type of stuff that does deserve a round of applause, right? At that moment where you decide that I'm just gonna get up and keep going. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I don't care about the mistake that I made or how hard it hurt when I fell down. I'm gonna get up, I'm gonna keep going, I'm gonna make this change because it's what I want in my life. It's what I'm gonna go after. Now, if you could go back and give some advice to someone who's just getting started, you've fallen on your face a couple times. I'm going to ask you about your mistakes here in a little bit, but if you could give yourself some advice, say you're starting over, what would that be? What advice would you get?
Three key things, right? For me, it's authenticity, right? We got to realize that authenticity accelerates trust. And what we tend to do is when you have authentic intent, when you have a mindset that says selling won't help, but helping will sell, I'm here to serve, making a living and making a change don't have to be mutually exclusive. And I have that impact mindset and I have that authenticity of intent. You don't have to worry about methodology, body language, any of that stuff. You'll be naturally great at sales because selling won't help, but helping will sell. The one I struggled with the most though was agency. You have to give yourself permission to believe that you can add value to the world. And there's that wonderful saying by Tony Robbins, the story you own is the story you live. And I was telling myself a narrative of what I could be worth. So I'd say this to any young entrepreneurs. We don't rise, it's not my quote, but we don't rise to the level of our ambitions. We fall to the level of our standards. And you have to raise the floor. The ceiling will take care of itself. And as a dreamer and a visionary, I always had this vision of where I wanted to go. But I was willing to accept mediocre customers. I was willing to accept mediocre work. I was willing to accept anything because trying to prove myself, as opposed to giving myself permission to say, you know what, Alan, doesn't matter where you're born, doesn't matter what you come from, doesn't matter what your background is. All of those things serve your story to tell the world. And when you own that conviction and you have that authentic intent, right, and then you apply the right attitude, things fall into place. And for the young people listening, with your entrepreneurial, even when you're going for a job interview, start with this mindset. Are they the right company for me? And I promise you, when you change that, you're not there trying to get the job. You're there to say, are you worthy of having me on your floor? It's authenticity and agency. And I think I'd go tell younger Al, raise your standards. Give yourself permission to change the world. Stop waiting for a gun to go off and someone say, okay, go, Al, here's your moment. It doesn't happen that way. And I think I delayed and made some big mistakes because I was small-minded in terms of I had big dreams, but I'll accept this and I'll accept this and I'll accept it. I didn't raise my standards.
Yeah, that authenticity is kind of tough, especially when you're young, because you feel judged by your authenticity rather than accepting that you're different and that's what makes you unique and awesome. You feel like that's something that you have to hide and kind of get away from because you want to fit in with the crowd. When you realize as you get older, it's not the fitting in that makes you the star. It's the fact that you're unique and different that brings that fuel to the fire.
You have to be yourself because everyone else is taken.
Yeah, exactly. So what were some of those big mistakes you made? Some of those things where you look back and you're like, dude, I really stepped in at that time. But of course, they became great learning lessons. What were some of those mistakes you had?
I think that everyone says that there's a fine line between arrogance and confidence. And what I learned was the line isn't fine. It's wide, it's clear, and it's black and white. The word is tact. You see, what happened with me is I confused authenticity with arrogance, meaning, this is how I am, this is what I do. And what we tend to do is then we rock up, we don't show up. We stop treating it as a profession. So as we start to get a certain level and say, what, I've given myself agency and I'm going to be myself and I have a voice to say, we've got to realize that that tact means I can have an opinion without damaging the relationship. And I think what started to happen is I started to get really cocksure in the fact that I had this conviction, but I was delivering it poorly. And it was one of the mistakes I made because we get caught up in that fixed mindset. And what I didn't do is I didn't challenge my standards or my ceiling. And I would call it the cycle of comfort for too long. I was doing well compared to those around me, but I wasn't doing well compared to the purpose I was given on this planet.
Let me ask you about that. That authenticity for a lot of people is going to be one of the biggest struggles. But if you have that conviction like you talked about, you have that agency, you give yourself that permission to move forward, you tend to shape the way your business operates and it kind of cascades into your clientele. Do you have any case studies, any stories that you can tell me about how that authenticity transferred over to your clientele to help them be successful as well?
Yeah, 100%. So we were bidding for a large piece of work in a financial institution that's spread across Africa. And I had a moment where they said to me, Al, we want to build a sales academy. And inside of me, I had the certainty that it was the wrong approach. But that's what they were looking for. And I had this voice inside my head that said these words: it would be borderline negligent to not share your voice now. And I said to them, I said, look, you're doing this the wrong way. Competencies are the outcome, not the cause. The cause of successful sales is a values system. We're creative, we're customer centric, we are tactful, right? And we make sure that we focus on delivering value. And in that moment, it was interesting, at the end of that entire pitch, she came, the leading buyer came to me and said, you demonstrated every value you said made the difference. And 2 weeks later, we got a massive gig for that organization. But in that moment, and this is the thing we have to realize about authenticity, wonderful research on this, Brene Brown, she wrote a book called Daring Greatly, but she actually studies shame. We're not authentic because we're shameful to bring that person out. I'm shameful of my voice because, yeah, senior people telling me they want a sales academy. I'm going, guys, you're baking this thing the wrong way. But I had to demonstrate that it would be negligent for me not to do that. And the way I like to see it is I have to be a Sherpa that guides them up the mountain. Selling won't help, but helping will sell. And if that's my intentional authenticity, then if I lost the deal, I'm on the right side of history for me.
Shame. I love Brene Brown stuff. If you ever get an opportunity to read any of her books, ladies and gentlemen, she has some great stuff. And if you listen to it on audio, she's the one actually reading it, which she has a personality in and of her own, which is really cool to listen to. But yeah, we carry shame with us all the time. It's, again, one of the reasons why we don't want to do certain things, why we don't speak up. And like when you were talking about your specific client, that gut feeling, sometimes we suppress it because of the shame that we have, whether we might be wrong or right. It doesn't really matter. We suppress it ourselves, not giving us that confidence or that agency to move forward. What do you feel your company does best? If I was to look, if I'm comparing different types of companies, I look at Growth Matters International. Why do people come to you specifically? What is it that you do best?
Fundamentally, it plays into I would call it my unique ability. So the concept of unique ability comes from Dan Sullivan, strategic coach. Wonderful book out now if you're an entrepreneur. 10x is easier than 2x by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. But this is what it is. I develop practical frameworks and simply executable processes. So I'd say the fundamental difference is you can step away from a session, you can apply it tomorrow, and you can have impact in a week. And that's the blessing of my DNA. I had an engineer as a father, I had an artist as a mother, I had an English teacher as a grandmother, and an entrepreneur as a grandfather. So I'm not denying I've got some lucky DNA in that mix. But my unique ability, what makes us different, is a practical framework of execution. Because I think we drown in theoretical. And people need to be able to take something like practical, podcasts like yours. Here's the practical thing you can walk away with today. Go do that. As opposed to, here's the theoretical MBA style view of the world. It's not how it works out there. Whereas Tyson says everyone has a plan till they get punched in the mouth.
That engineer mindset, though, makes a big difference. I feel like there's a lot of businesses that struggle with processes and procedures, and having that engineer mindset to be able to break things down into those little subsections, it's really freeing for a business owner to know what the process and procedure is, and then get somebody who's really good at that piece and bring them in and fill in those spots. But it's not easy for somebody to see those pieces. So that engineer mindset really helps to kind of break those things down, create those SOPs, those processes, whatever you need. So it's definitely one of your upsides. Every business, however, has something that they're working on, something that they need to improve upon because they're trying to become more efficient. They're trying to get better. What is it that your company needs help with? What are you working on to improve?
Yeah, right now it's effectively we're deploying this 10x is easier than 2x. The area we have to improve is, and this is so important because of what you just shared, organizations are starting to think that millennials are a problem. And we're going, wait a minute, guys, but they have a line of sight that we don't see. And here's the key thing, is the balance. And although I have the engineering mindset, this is the way I see it. If you want to be your own person, you're not going to like procedures and processes. But I don't care if you are you and I am me. The ingredients of a meal and the recipe of a meal have a certain requirement. You can't just say to the universe, oh, well, eggs don't bind. When you add eggs into any meal, it's going to bind stuff. If there's a recipe, I mean a ingredients. Then there's a recipe we follow. But what we have to allow is have to allow people to then to add their own uniqueness to that. And really, where I'm focusing on my business is creating environments that attract people that go do something that might be okay for me to do, or I'm good enough at, but it's someone else's unique space. And I believe that if employers and entrepreneurs are focused on getting people into their highest and best use, into their space of fascination, man, the recipe and the ingredients are just the entry into the game. But then we unlock human potential. And that's the upside of things like AI and ChatGPT and these things coming through, is if we do it right, we unlock our uniqueness. It's not a limitation, it's an accelerator. But it's a key point, because what I'm focusing on now is making sure I'm surrounding the right who's in the right seats.
I think he's wonderful.
I think he's wonderful too. And I think that's the hardest part, right? Is getting the right people. That's tough enough, but then putting them in the right seats so that you're going in the same direction, that's what a real CEO, a leader does, is they place these people in their strengths and then kind of guides the ship in the direction you want to go in. That as a CEO, you are that visionary. You're the person who's guiding these people, putting them in the right seats and taking them on that ride where you want to take them. What do you see as the CEO, as your future for your company? Where are you taking your company?
I think the key thing is, and this is something I'm learning over time. I mean, we're scaling, and we're going to be the go-to organization globally for sales management development. We know the vision, we know how to get there. But there's something I want to add on what you said that's so important for all your listeners, is sometimes you make the right decision and sometimes you make the decision right. It's not about finding the right person and sticking them into your right seat. Understand that when you bring people into the right environment, there's going to be uniqueness. There's going to be a unique talent, a unique something you can bring. And if you're creating environments that unlock that uniqueness, it might not be what you hired them for, but what you get from them is exponentially better than what you're getting. So it's knowing what to hire when, but then going, wait a minute, I can't panel beat this individual into my map of the world. What is it that they're strong? And as you help them move to their uniqueness, they remain engaged, they remain motivated, and they stay part of your organization. And no matter what it is, Richard Branson said it best. Companies say they care about customers. The only way you know is how we treat the people that work for us. And if you take the work of Tony Hsieh or any of the key people, it's simple. Allow people to be people. We are human beings, not human doings. And as a CEO, that's my job. Unlock human potential through human beingness, not human doingness.
Yeah, that's I mean, a lot of these big CEOs of major companies have learned along the way. These lines don't just get developed. They sound great, but it's because of the years of experience that they've had. They've made a ton of mistakes. They've had great people that they turn away or push away, trying to force them into positions that aren't a good fit. And we talked earlier about, having your own agency and giving yourself permission to do certain things. But when you start bringing on team members, you got to allow them the agency and the ability for them to accelerate and be who they are as well, allowing for their mistakes just as well as you allowed for your own, because that's going to happen. It's part of the learning process. So I 100% agree with you. As a CEO, sometimes it really takes that flexibility in understanding that, your name's on the building, but you're allowing these people that room within this boundary to grow and develop as personnel. Now, Alan, if people
we're not running a production line, and that's the key thing. We're not running a production line. We're dealing with human beings, not human doings. We're outside of the industrial age. And now, as we've got ChatGPT and AI coming through, we have to get into the creative age. And as a CEO, I can't do that unless I'm allowing people to find their unique benefit and capability in my business. And if they outgrow my business, wonderful, because they're an asset to the world.
Yeah, exactly. Your job is to make better human beings, and most of them will stick around with you as you make them better. But the ones that go off and change the world, that's not a bad thing either. Alan, if people want to reach out to you, they want to work with you, they want to find out more about what you have to offer, how can they do that?
Yeah, I mean, you go to growthmattersinternational.com, and then Alan Versteeg. You're not going to get another Alan Versteeg out there. So you just hit me on my socials. You'll find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on all the places that matter. And that's where you'll find me. It's there's only one Alan Versteeg, and it's a G. When you say South African, the American is Versteeg, but in South Africa we use it to clear our throats.
Perfect, man. Perfect. Alan, thank you very much for coming on the show, ladies and gentlemen. growthmattersinternational.com, growthmattersinternational.com. And the international is shortened, so it's INTL. So growthmattersintl.com. Make sure you guys check out Alan and what he's doing. He's going to change the world one team at a time. They're already doing it, and you guys got to check out their stuff. Alan, thank you very much for coming on the program today, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Just smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave.
It's over. Go home. Is your business in need of marketing? Try starting a podcast. But not just any podcast. Podcast like a pro. We can show you how to take your business from being invisible to becoming a brand people trust. Go to www.businessbros.biz to get started today.